what is ayahuasca? Because not everybody knows what it is.
Yeah.
So what is ayahuasca?
Yeah. So ayahuasca is a brew. It's made from 2 different vines from mainly the Amazon. So very South America. It's an indigenous medicine of the indigenous peoples that has been used for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and centuries and thousands of years. And they've used it as a medicine, as a plant healer, to help with vision and lots of different things in their society, for dealing with trauma, for helping people who are sick, who are dealing with all sorts of struggle.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I am your host, Stacey Uhrig, and I have my guest today is KarenMaloney. And if you don't remember Karen was on the podcast a while back. Link to her original episode will be in the show notes, where she was sharing with us a little bit about her journey to becoming an inner work coach. And one of the things that came up in our last interview, what we started to tap into and dabble into a little bit, was her experience and her exposure to plant-based medication, plant-based therapies, ayahuasca, psilocybin, yobo, cambo, all of the good stuff. And so I had asked her to come back on today to really share what that experience is. As a trauma coach, the topic of psychedelics, the topic of plant-based medicine is one that's getting a lot of play. I attended a conference with Bessel van der Kolk and Dick Schwartz and Gabor Mate and a handful of other experts back in May in Boston. And this was a hot topic. It is something that everybody's talking about. There were quite a few workshops on this, especially with Bessel, where people are really starting to explore the benefits of these types of therapies under the guise of someone who knows what they're doing, not just like going and hitting some acid on your own, but, you know, really working with a trained professional who knows how to utilize these types of alternative medicines in order to, what I like to call, tap into that portal of consciousness. As someone who specializes in using hypnotherapy by way of RTT with my clients, it's always interesting for me to see the different ways to tap into the self-conscious, the self-aware, the higher source. I've had a handful of clients who have done plant-based medication retreats, therapies, guided, and then have come to me and we've done RTT. And it's been interesting for me to see the difference, you know, ask them what the differences have been. So though Karen has not done RTT before, what I really want to do today is just dive into kind of the who, what, where, and why. Like, why take that path? How did you do it? Where did you do it? With whom did you do it? And really, what was the benefit and the outcome? So welcome, Karen. Thanks for coming back on.
Thank you, Stacey. It's a pleasure to be back. And I'm actually really excited to have this conversation as well, because it's not something I've really spoken about so much. And honestly, probably a couple of years ago, I couldn't have spoken about it because I didn't really have the full understanding and the integration and everything. So anyway, I'm so excited to be here and, you know, just answer your question of why or how. It was absolutely not something that was on my radar in any way, shape, or form. I had never heard of ayahuasca. I wasn't into drugs or anything like that. But I remember in 2017, I had gone through a really traumatic breakup, I think that I touched on in the last podcast. I had decided to go traveling to South America. It was calling me. I had backpacked around the world for years before that. And I'd never got to South America, even though it was always like a dream. And I remember a friend of mine before I left, he told me about ayahuasca. And I remember thinking, going, that sounds absolutely insane. There is no way in the world that would ever call me or I would ever be interested in. Absolutely no way. Bye. And off I went to my travels, not thinking, like that. It wasn't something that was on my mind. And even now, I can look back and say, even for me to be open to that, even though I wasn't open, but then it filtered in, because the medicine does call you. It's not something just to do for the crack and just to try it out. And like you say, just, I believe anyway, because I've done enough, they are sacred, they are powerful, but they're just another tool. And I don't believe they're to be played with. But anyway, he had mentioned it to me, and I believe I had been attuned to Reiki the year before that as well, which I also think was pivotal in the knock-on of so many other things coming across my path, which again, I didn't see at the time, you know?
Mm.
But yeah, so I went thinking, absolutely no way in hell would I do it. No way. He had told me about a place in Colombia that he had done it. And I happened to actually be there on a weekend that a ceremony was happening that I'd heard about. And I was like, I just wasn't feeling it. And I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And then I thought that was it. I honestly, after that moment, I thought that was my opportunity. I was like, okay, well, it's definitely not going to come across my path again, even though I'd met lots of people who had spoken about it and different things. And then one day I arrived to Cusco in Peru, and I just started walking the streets, and it was so beautiful. And I was down alleyways, and normally I'd always have my phone out to see like, where was I, and not getting totally lost. But I was just totally lost in the city. And I remember at one stage I just stopped, and on the wall I just saw this kind of like chalkboard, and it had, you know, San Pedro ceremony, ayahuasca, all these kind of things. And there was a little shaman shop right in the corner in this little courtyard. And I kind of stopped dead. I'd been wandering for ages, and I just started laughing. I was like, okay, it's like, this has to be some kind of a joke. And then I was like, okay. So I was like, I'll just go talk to the shaman and see what happens. So I went in, and he was there, and he was lovely. And I was just talking to him. He was really nice. I just had a good feeling. And next thing I knew, I had signed up, and it was the following weekend or something like that.
So I wanted to stop you right there, because I'm dying to hear what happens, but I want, for the benefit of the listeners, people who are not familiar with any of this, a couple of things. Number one, what is ayahuasca? Because not everybody knows what it is.
Yeah.
So what is ayahuasca?
Yeah. So ayahuasca is a brew. It's made from two different vines from mainly the Amazon. So very South America. It's an indigenous medicine of the indigenous peoples that has been used for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years and centuries and thousands of years. And they've used it as a medicine, as a plant healer, to help with vision and lots of different things in their society, for dealing with trauma, for helping people who are sick, who are dealing with all sorts of struggles. So it's present, it's prevalent, it's always been part of their heritage. And often, like these things, I think sometimes when the world really falls out of balance, they start becoming more mainstream. And there is a whole side of it that it has become mainstream and cool, and it's totally been commercialized and exploited. And that's why I always say to people as well, you need to do your due diligence, and you need to really know who you're connecting with and who you're working with. One, because of that whole background, but two, also because you're in a really vulnerable state when you're in your process. So yeah, it's a brew. It's made from two vines. There's all the questions of, well, how do they know to mix these two specific vines to make this brew? And again, they talk about how it's the plants that told the peoples in the first place, because they are a consciousness. Oh, I just got goosebumps when I said that. They are a consciousness because they weren't looking for something, and they're two very specific kind of random parts that they, it wouldn't necessarily make sense. And they brew it anyway. And it's nearly like, it's not a tea, it's thicker than a tea, but it's a drink then that you take.
Okay. So people would go and find, it's important that people understand this. If you're seeking this out, because I really want people to understand, just like you did, you can find these shamans, which I want to also explain to people what a shaman is, because not everybody knows. You can seek out these shamans, but there are also very well-known retreats now, typically in South America, though there are some here in the States, where, they create these quote unquote brews. and they're done under a guide of structure. Okay. I think there was a really well-known show recently on Hulu called 9 Perfect Strangers. And it's when these 9 perfect strangers are all seeking healing, and they all choose to go to this retreat in South America. And actually, that retreat might be like in California, but they all go on this retreat and they all do ayahuasca and they all get exposed to psilocybin and all these different things. And you get to experience what it is that happens with them. So it's a fantasized view of that. But in your case, you're finding the shaman. Explain to people what a shaman is if people don't know.
Yeah. And again, I don't know if I would have the absolute correct term, but for me, again, a shaman is a person who grew up with that tradition. So he was, what was his name? Kush, something like that. He was from the indigenous tribe. He grew up with ayahuasca. He learned from his grandfather and taught his father, and his father taught him. So there's this whole lineage of learning and working with the medicine and working with all sorts of medicine and consciousness. It's not just ayahuasca, and often it's not even the medicine. It's more the consciousness being connected to the earth, to the land, to the plants, to nature, to everything, to the divinity and everything, and working with it and really growing up with it and having it as part of who they are and how they operate in the world. And then if they choose to share as well and work in that capacity, they're bringing all this experience to it.
Yeah.
So I've done it with shamans, but also not. I've done it with regular people who have been called to work with the medicines, who have trained as well for a really long time and facilitated. And it's been as powerful.
So you sign up with this gentleman, this shaman, to do this ayahuasca experience. And are there other people, or is it just you?
So there was just one other girl who had signed up as well. So there was just the 2 of us.
Okay. And take us through what that looked like.
Yeah. So we went to his house, which he lived way up the mountains in Cusco, and that's where he worked from. And he had a beautiful medicine tent and a temazcal, naturally made, which is like a sweat lodge that we did the next day and all these kind of things. And we were with his family, his wife and his kids, and we stayed in the house. And then the ceremony for ayahuasca is always nighttime. So you go out then at night, there's always a preparation, you spend some time just setting intentions and things like that. And I felt, obviously I was terrified, but I know to trust my intuition. I'd been trusting it a long time. So I knew it was calling me. I knew there was a reason. And I remember I was talking to my brother, and I also knew that I had a strong mind and that I knew I could talk myself through anything if anything came up that I didn't like. And I'd sent my brother all where his contact details and where I was going to be. I was like, just in case, because, you do have these moments of doubt going, what the hell am I doing? And I remember during that first journey as well, I did have a moment because it was 2 shamans. Another shaman came to guide the ceremony, and it was beautiful in the sense of, they were singing all night. They were playing different instruments. It was all in Spanish and their indigenous language as well. But it was really beautiful. But I have to say as well, that night, having been called to it more as well, I was too in control because I was actually terrified to let go.
Yes.
Which is a huge aspect because, again, the medicine is a tool, but it won't do the work for you. And if we choose to resist, we can resist it. Absolutely.
I want people to get a picture of this. So when we talk about an ayahuasca ceremony, right, you're saying it's done in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
Is it fair to say that the purpose of the ceremony and the purpose of drinking this ayahuasca is to really purge, if you will, some of this deeply rooted shit, emotional shit, your consciousness, this understanding of the world and yourself and everyone else in it, to get a clearer view of why you walk in the world the way that you do. Is that a good way for people to understand it?
Yes, I think it is, but also it's very individual. So more than anything, it shows you, and it brings you to what's hidden within, what you need to see, which is not always obvious as well, because even though afterwards or now I can see, oh no, it was clearly me, at the time, it doesn't appear, not that it doesn't appear that way, it's clear as day. But again, it's our consciousness to know that, oh, this is showing me. And I've met people who were researching, ayahuasca for like 10 years before they finally got to do it, and were studying and all these kind of things. I had no clue. I had absolutely no clue. I hadn't researched, and that's okay as well. So again, and that fear of losing control was huge for me. So there is intended to be a purge as well. I didn't purge that first time. I don't always purge. Not everyone always purges, but I've had some really deep processes as well where I felt I was clean from the inside out. So every time is very different. Every experience is very different. It's very individual for every single person. And one person who could have, do one session and next thing they're like, boom, they get the message. They feel so clear and they're instantly moving in another direction. I've met people like that. That wasn't me. I needed to go a couple of times. And even then, I would say it's taken me years to really integrate and fully get the messages. And I still some days have revelations and insights and been like, oh yeah, seeing things in a different capacity. But it is that sense of you're moving out of the mind. The thinking mind is offline. So you're completely in the body, you're completely connected to a higher consciousness. Again, not that I could have said I had those words at the time that I knew that was happening. And you do get to see things from a different perspective. And even though I didn't have, like, my first journey was just so uncomfortable the whole night. Like, I was just twisting and turning and so uncomfortable. Like, oh, my body ached. And I was just like, and it's all night. So it's at least, could be 5, 6, 7 hours. So you're already tired. They always do it at night because it's a different consciousness and perspective as well. And I was just, and I didn't get sick and I didn't go to the toilet. And I was just like,
and do you think it's because you were holding on too tight?
Completely. Now I can say, yeah, because I was terrified to let go of control. I was terrified of what might happen, what might come up, what would happen. So yeah, I didn't fully go with the process. And again, my mind, I remember going, I'll be okay, everything's fine, and kind of talking myself through it the whole time, that I didn't allow the medicine fully in and to give me the help and support that I needed. And,
so it's interesting. Yeah. Can I stop you for a second? Because it's, I've never done plant-based medication. I've never done plant-based therapies. I've never done any of these ceremonies, but I specialize in hypnosis. And so a lot of what I see is this conversation is being able to tap into your subconscious, this higher source, this higher self, which you can do by way of hypnosis as well. So there's always this interesting debate happening within my industry of like, not which is better, because I don't think there's a better or worse. It's just whatever works for the person. It's very, very rare that I work with someone when I'm doing hypnosis, which I also, just like you said, see it as a tool. It's very rare that I don't have somebody that can just relax into it. If they're coming to me and they're signing up for this program, they know they've made the conscious decision that they're looking to do this, right? Yeah. So it's very rare that somebody doesn't go all in. But recently I had someone that wanted to do it, but didn't want to do it. She signed up for it, but I could tell she was not resistant, but I just I knew there was more of a wall up than I typically see.
Yeah.
And I did guide her through, like someone would guide you through an ayahuasca ceremony. I did guide her through this journey that is RTT under hypnosis. And I could see it. I could feel it energetically, this wall. And everywhere where I was trying to take her, she was not connecting in a level that I've seen other people connect in before. So I just kindly, gently guided and pivoted her and tried to get out of the experience for her the best she could. This woman walks with a lot of physical pain. It's one of the reasons why she's been coming to work with me. And she ended up being in excruciating pain after the fact. And I had to gently try to explain to her it's because she's holding on too hard. Mm-hmm. She's holding on too hard. I could see it in the session. I could see it in the hypnosis. And there's a part of her, and I say that very deliberately, there is a part of her that is unwilling to let go. Yeah. But yet she's riddled with pain. So what I'm trying to get her to now do is explore and dialogue with this part of her that is this chronic, excruciating pain to see what it thinks it's doing for her. Because there's a part that thinks it's protecting her, I'm sure, right? Yeah, this is kind of this internal family systems piece. Mm-hmm. But, I could see if you weren't really letting to lean in, it would be a very physically discomforting experience.
Yeah. But, and yes, it was. I mean, it wasn't excruciating. It was just completely uncomfortable. And the thing about it is, it's also a long process. And I think that puts people off. Like once you take it, I mean, whatever happens, and you can't stop it. I mean,
yeah, once you're on the train.
Yeah, I was uncomfortable and it was a night of that. But also, even though I wouldn't say that first ceremony I had major insights and revelations, I actually thought the opposite because I'd met lots of people who had that. And it makes me laugh today. I was like, oh, ego. I was like, well, maybe I'm already enlightened or something because I didn't have any massive ahas, like some people I'd met. And it just makes me laugh. Whereas the medicine still worked because the thing about it is I still took the opportunity and I still worked on my integration. And I had started a daily practice anyway of, I can't even remember what it was back in the time. I know tapping had come across my path at the time. I was traveling, journaling, different things like that. But again, I would say maybe 6 months later, I started having the loads of epiphanies and seeing things differently. And it was funny because I had met a guy straight after that. And again, it's funny how divinely orchestrated it was because he was extremely in his masculine. And I had never met someone like that before. Like that, I had my barriers up. I was in my masculine. I was trying to control everything. I would not let anything in. And I remember I used to meet him and I was like, who are you? Like, what is happening? Because I was receiving him and allowing him to do things for me, which I had never done before in my life. So there had been shifts and changes, but I didn't notice them. And I remember it was a couple of months later, and we'd been having conversations, me, and he's still a really good friend of mine. But and we'd have deep conversations and I'd be like, you're amazing and all these kind of things, but you've got this like wall around your heart. And even though we'd always talk about how life is reflecting us and all these kind of things, the penny didn't drop. And then like 6 months later, just one day it was like, oh my God, yeah, he has walls, but like he's aware. I'm like, it's me. Like I've been reflecting me the whole time. And again, things started to awaken different insights, perspectives, which again, I ran with and worked with. And then again, ayahuasca started calling me again. Even though after the first time I was like, I would never do that again. Why? It's so uncomfortable. No, done it. Not for me. Bye.
So I want to, before we get into this, this next journey with ayahuasca, what I want people to try to understand is this. The integration's huge, right? And it sometimes it does take time.
Absolutely.
So what does that mean? When I'm going to use, again, I use hypnosis, RTT as a tool. You were using ayahuasca as a tool to gain clarity, right? I want that to be really clear. People go through these experiences, through these journeys to try to gain clarity on life and how we navigate life, right? And my personal philosophy is that we have experiences early on in life, let's just say before we're 12 years old, that cause us to start to navigate life through a lens that we've created based on those experiences. Right? So we form a set of core beliefs about who we are, what the world is about, what other people are, and we create a filter. And that filter is placed on the lens through which we see ourselves, the world, and other people around us. And it's fine and it's functional at the moment. Yeah. But as we become older, it becomes irrelevant. But we don't even know that we have a filter or a lens. Yeah. And this is where ego comes in sometimes, because you can see it, you know, two people in the same experience or even in the same conversation or in the same event having very different interpretations of what's going on. Often the interpretation is because we're each bringing into that experience our own lived experiences that created this filter on the lens. Yeah. So using that concept, when we're doing something like a plant-based therapy or guided therapy using ketamine or LSD or ayahuasca or psilocybin, or you're working with a therapist that specializes in hypnosis like I do, what we're really looking to do is explore and get curious about the filters that we've put on the lens through which we see life. And how do we kind of shatter it and look at life through more of just a clear lens, like the real truth of what it all is, not an interpretation of it. Yeah. And so what I loved hearing you say is you had this experience. It was clearly starting to shatter that lens a little bit, but you have to now live a little bit and start to see these minor shifts and adjustments that you're like, oh, wait a minute. Wow, that's a little different. Or I would have reacted differently to that. Or I see that differently now. And that's what I'm looking for with my clients. I'm always saying to them, do you notice any little shifts? And they do. And I tell them, you're not looking for big thunderstorms here. You're looking for slivers. You know, little minor shifts, adjustments until they start to become more of your norm and you're seeing things through a clearer lens. So when I use that kind of analogy, does that make sense to what you were experiencing?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Because I think that's the truth of any kind of work or anybody working with a person, whether it's coaching, whether it's hypnosis, whether it's breath work, whether it's Reiki, there's so many different modalities. And again, the intention is for us to get out of our own way, is to see things from a different perspective and viewpoint. Absolutely. So completely. But where I think the plant medicines are different compared to different things that I've tried, and I've tried a lot of things, they're not a rapid solution. They're not something that you maybe just do once and boom. Like there is no magic pill, full stop, across any spectrum.
Good answer.
Any spectrum, there is no magic pill. And actually the ceremony in and of itself is just the tip of the iceberg. It's just the flash in the pan. It is all the daily work and the daily practice you do afterwards that really makes the change. It's the integration, it's the action, it's the daily steps that we must do no matter what modality we're working with. We can have these opportunities, but I feel with the plant medicines, the opportunity is huge. We're talking massive scope that, I just got goosebumps again, that you don't get necessarily straight off with other modalities. And again, I'm not saying I had that straight off. I did have it, but I had to kind of test the water first. I felt a bit more confident that I could really go in and let go and just allow the process and the ceremony to unfold. And that is huge. Like, I remember one time afterwards, I was like, I feel like there's just been a seismic shift. And I didn't even know what it was at the time, but I was like, I just feel like there is a seismic shift. But again, it's still me who did the work to integrate and to make the changes. It doesn't make the changes for you. And again, I've met all sorts of people as well in these ceremonies and since in life who were, I don't know, really in a bad way, heroin addicts and all sorts, who really did one ceremony or one retreat and from then have changed their whole lives. Like, it is possible, but it's not going to happen magically. I think the opportunity and the portal is huge because genuinely all those neural pathways, they're offline. They've been changed. They're open. They are wide open. But again, it's us who has to move in a new direction. It's us who has to be willing to look at what comes up and to work with what comes up. Because again, and I've been in ceremonies as well, I've had one where I just felt I was obliterated to a billion pieces. I didn't even know who I was or what the hell was going on when I came out. And I actually had this major, like, it felt like a complete void, emptiness, major, like, depression, sadness. I remember there was a couple of weeks where every day when I opened my eyes, I was like, oh, I'm here again. I should freaking do it again. I was just like, no, like this, no. But again, it took me the work to restart and be like, oh no, this is the gift. This is why anything is possible.
I think this is really important. I just was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about this because they said the same thing. Like, it's important when you're, and the term microdosing is very popular now. So I'm using that so people understand. When you're looking to get these shifts, these new lenses, these new filters, this new awakening, right? This portal through which things become much clearer in life. It is so important that you do this in a guided way. And you're doing it with the support of a village of people that specialize in all of it. Mm-hmm. Because, like you said, you're now waking up. Sometimes we're uncovering things that are massive that need a safe place to be supported so you can move through the emotions that are aligned with the experience. Mm-hmm. To get to the other side. So I hear you saying it, but I really want to hone it home for people. These ceremonies and these experiences and these retreats are a catalyst. Mm-hmm. They are a fuel to a fire. They are a tool in someone's toolbox, but they are not the end all be all. It is the rapid opening of a new way of seeing yourself in life, which is great. Mm-hmm. However, you can uncover stuff that is traumatic, that needs to be processed in the right way with the right knowledge. Otherwise, you can be left feeling very alone and very scared. Like you were saying, you were waking up and going, oh my God, it's like Groundhog's Day. It's like, again, this life, this shitty life here on earth as a human being. Like, it's really important for people to understand the very first interview. And I'm thinking now I have 3 or 4 of you I've interviewed that have really had some deep level experiences with plant-based medicines. And I'm thinking about doing like an interview where I have you all on. Okay. Almost like a panel discussion. But Aram and Doye was my first episode for this series, Flip That Shit, which was 2 years ago. And she had done psilocybin and she did it twice. Both times she did it unguided. And the first time she was vomiting everywhere. She was sick as a dog. She said it was hell. It was out because she didn't really know how to facilitate. I think this is the word that's so important. No one was facilitating it for her. She had a very scary experience with it. She did it then again facilitated, and it was a very different experience. She got the benefit of it. So I think it's really important for people to understand there are benefits of these experiences, but it's so important that they are guided and facilitated by someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah.
Whether it's LSD, MDMA, ketamine, ayahuasca, psilocybin, whatever it is that you're doing, you got to do it with someone who knows what they're doing.
Yeah. And that's actually the magic of it as well, because I always say to people as well, if they're thinking of doing it, if they're called, again, be confident of who you're doing it with. But then also I say, do a retreat, do at least 2 or 3 nights. One night, like my first time, I was like, it's not worth it. You really, if it's calling you, go all in, because again, the ceremony is just one part. It's at night. But in that whole container of a whole weekend and being immersed, and they do loads of dynamics and integration. Like I've had the most incredible experiences on retreat with the most incredible facilitators that really, if I hadn't have done those and had so much kind of depth and integration and everything in the one weekend, where I've opened up, I've cracked open, I said things that I'd never said before, and you're having these conversations, you're in this space, in this bubble kind of for a couple of days, it pays dividends than just doing a one night. My experience, I say if someone is being called, if they can, do minimum 2 nights and really be immersed in it to get a deeper experience, but also come out maybe not feeling so confused as well is a huge one. Confused or blasted open. You feel a bit more grounded again. It's like a whole container from start to finish that they make sure you go back to the world as well, kind of with your feet on the ground again. So I always say that as well. And again, like I've said, the ceremony is powerful, and it's actually sometimes it's so magic, and you just get lost in it and you forget about everything, and you're connected to the universe, and you're just like, oh my God, this is so incredible. And you see the magic of it all as well. Yes, there's dark, but there's also incredibleness as well, that it's an adjustment coming back to real life as well. So I think it's really nice to do it in a whole container, in an immersion space, that you kind of do it in a row, you have the whole support, and then you go back to the world. And for me anyway, I always felt, okay, I'm kind of ready now again to reintegrate, because even though it might be 2 or 3 nights, or 2 days, 3 nights, or 3 nights, 4 days, it feels like lifetimes, when you're in that kind of an environment and doing that kind of work every night. And it's also really like, you're exhausted as well sometimes because it's every night and the ceremonies, but it's not an exhaustion like, a hangover where you're tired, but you're grumpy and you feel achy and heavy. It's really like life-giving, uplifting exhaustion as well. It's like, I am beat, but I've never felt more alive. And yes, this is difficult, and I don't know if I want to go into ceremony again, but I'm here and I'm showing up and I'm going to do it. And yeah, it's really, I think, important and really special and magic doing it in a retreat and not just a once-off.
So if someone is listening to this and wants more information, where do they start?
Oh, that's a good question. It depends where they're living, where they're based. Even just go to Facebook and just Google ayahuasca or see what comes up, because I was surprised to discover that there was a whole community here in Ireland doing it that I did not expect. I did not even know. And they had like, I don't know, 13,000 likes on their Facebook or something, that I was like, okay, well, it's not just two people in their sitting room, like, you know, doing ceremonies or whatever. And I went to a talk that they were given in Dublin and I got a good feel. So you really just have to put your feelers out there, do some researching, maybe say to some friends, ask around, because I don't think there's a direct, oh, just go to this website and find the information. And again, I believe anyway, you will be led to the right thing if it is for you. And even like mine, it just all magically unfolded without me ever having to look for it. And every time since then, it all just kind of fell into place without me spending a lot of time looking and researching and Googling. I mean, outside of that, but even when I came across that, you know, Facebook group in Dublin or in Ireland, for example, like that weekend or the next week they were having a talk, and then it all just happened really quick. So I think it always works out when it's the right time, and if it's truly calling you, you will find.
Well, I mean, it really makes me think of the law of attraction, right? So this idea of whether you've been vocal about it or just been saying it to yourself, this intention of, I'm seeking something more. I'm seeking more answers to this thing called life, or whatever it is, right? That you're kind of yearning for. Believing it's available to you is a very, very important aspect of this. When you can set an intention and believe that you're available for it and that you're deserving of it and that you're worthy of it, it will present itself.
Yeah.
Right? Then you can receive it. You can't receive these things and have these signs and be lost in a city in Peru and turn around and see this ayahuasca retreat, or happen to come across, you know, a group in Ireland. Like, you were setting an intention that you're curious and you want more, and you believe inherently it's available to me, meaning I'm worthy of it.
Yeah.
And now you're open to receiving and seeing things you may have not seen before.
Yeah. And again, you know, I look at it differently because I never had that intention to look at myself at that time or to work with ayahuasca. But again, there's no such thing as coincidence. You know, my friend mentioning it to me obviously set a seed, even though I was not looking for it at all. And I never looked for it, but it called me. And it all just worked out. So
that's kind of my point. You might not have been thinking about ayahuasca, but you might have been open to and thinking of transcending, right? And getting connected to something higher. Really?
That was not.
That's so great.
That time. And that's why I even prefaced with the fact that I was attuned to Reiki as well, I think had a huge unfolding, and even brought that into my stratosphere in the first place through my friend, because before that I just don't think it would have even landed. And like that, when I was not actively looking for something, the inner work, seeing things from a bigger picture, transcendence. Right. No, I can't say that about me. That's why I say the medicine calls you if you're to work with it as well. And like that, my friend had planted the seed. I didn't think it was going to happen. It all just fell into place that I was like, okay, I know me to trust my intuition. I was like, I better just go check this out. And I found myself signing up that way. And every time it worked like that. I wasn't looking for the medicine again. I mean, things were starting to unravel. Yes, afterwards I'd started being more curious. I'd always been curious, but I allowed my curiosity to lead me more. I felt like, oh, maybe there's something in the curiosity. But again, it called me, and I literally felt it all in my energy. And the first thing I said when it started to call me again was like, I said never again. Like, where the hell is this coming from? And then I was like, okay, Karen, maybe there's something here that I need to look at again and just see what happens. And then boom, it just all unfolded again really quickly. So, you know, it can absolutely happen both ways.
Now, you've done ayahuasca twice.
Oh, no, I've probably done ayahuasca, I would say all in maybe about 10 times.
Amazing. Yeah. And what else have you dabbled with?
Never planned any of it. So within those retreats as well, they often share some other medicines that can help the process, especially in preparing in the evenings and like to even go into the process in the first place. But some of the other ones that I did was Cambo, which is not hallucinogenic. Cambo is from a frog, and it's kind of their venom, and they burn your skin and they literally kind of put it on it, just the very top layer. And that's a huge purge. I mean, it's like 15 minutes.
Interesting.
15 minutes, so intense. It goes straight to where your body needs it in the first place. And I remember in my first Cambo session, oh my God, my head, I felt like it was going to explode. It just was like throbbing and everything. It goes all over your body. It's a massive cleanse mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And literally I purged and it was done. So I've done quite a bit of that as well. And I have done Bufo, which when you're talking about plant medicines, and I remember I heard Stanislav Grof talking about Bufo a couple of years ago in a podcast, and him and his wife who created holotropic breathwork. And when he was talking about Bufo, and I've heard many people as well talking about Bufo, it is next level. And it is, like I mentioned with ayahuasca and with any of them really, you can fight, you can resist it. It will always come in some way, but you'll just feel worse and struggle more. With Bufo, there is no way. It's from another frog, but you smoke it and it hits instantly. Within seconds, you are gone. And again, it's a short process, but when you come out of it, you're like, how long was that? And all of these things are so hard to explain. The experience of them is totally different. Nobody can put into words any of them. And that's why I say everyone will have a different experience and interpretation. But I remember I used to ask the facilitators and guides, I'd be like, but how would you explain Bufo? And they're like, it's the highest vibrational medicine that exists on planet Earth. And it's the closest connection to source, to divinity. And I was like, yeah, well, okay, but what does that mean? Kind of thing, you know? Right. And in my process, I was like, oh my God, I get exactly what they mean. Because I felt like, I just saw the light, and it was the most beautiful white light. And I heard this sound and I was just like, oh my God, like, this is it. This is it. And now I could say, maybe did I die? Or not did I die, because I didn't, I'm here. But is that experience of death and the truth of where we're from, and actually the love and source and consciousness? And is that what I experienced?
It's almost like when you're talking about this last one that you smoked, it's almost as though like this dream of life, as we interpret it, as we see it, the movie that we're constantly in is all shut down, and you're literally just energy. In the source of vibration and light.
Yeah.
Which can be intense.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny. Well, if you want to hear a funny story, and this is when I knew you need to know your facilitators, and they need to be trained and really know how to deal with things when things kick off. Because I remember one of the retreats I was in, they were doing Bufo in the afternoon, and a couple had come who weren't on our retreat, but they had come back to finish their last round of Cambo. They say if you do 3 rounds of Cambo within 28 days, it's like an immunity boost and a protection, a defense. It's a real reset. So they were coming back for their third, and they had done it that morning, but they just needed to wait a couple of hours and like have some lunch and things before they could drive off. And they were asking me, we're sitting having lunch, and they were like, are you going to do Bufo? And I was like, no, I don't think so. Like, no, whatever. And they're like, oh, we're so sorry we didn't do it. You know, everyone in their retreat, whenever it was a couple of weeks beforehand, everyone was like, wow, oh my God, it was the most amazing thing in the world. And And they were all just like, in awe, mesmerized, floating. And I was like, oh, I don't know. But I was like, no, I'm not doing it. And I didn't. But you could be in the room. They're like, okay, if you want to be in the room and to be a support, you can be there, or stay out. That's absolutely fine. But if you're in, you're in. If you're out, you're out. Once we start administering the medicine, we can't be moving in or out. And I was like, fine. I was like, no, I'll go in. I'll help. And there must have been maybe, I'd say 5 or 6 of them around the room who were going to do it. And they don't give it to everyone at once. They do one person at a time and just see how they're going. So this guy beside me, first of all, he took his, and you smoke it, and like that, you're gone instantly, and you have a bed. They're like, once you smoke it, we'll put our hand over your mouth, breathe in fully, and we'll just put you lying down, and off you go. See you after your journey. So this first guy, he went, and he was like blissed out and happy and blah, 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 and gave him a few minutes and was like, okay, he's doing okay. They went to another girl, gave it to her, and instantly she was like, ah, just making kind of sounds. We're like, okay. So they waited a few minutes and see what she was up to. Then they were about to start, and the third person, next thing in the meantime, this guy beside me started like spitting and everything. He was just like, blah, and I was just like, oh my God, I don't know where to look. I was like, what's going on? And then he started screaming like demonically. And I was just like, oh my God. Like, it sounded so demonic. It was just like, oh my God. And a few people who were waiting to go, I was like, how could you still say yes or whatever? And one guy who was going to be next was just like, oh my God. So he started screaming demonically. Next thing, this girl was taken off. She was trying to walk all around the room, and the facilitators were like, no, you have to stay in your place, and bring her back. But she was just like, what? Just moving around the place. The other guy was quiet. Next thing, they gave it to the other guy again, because he kind of calmed down again, the guy who was screaming demonically, and he was on his stomach and kind of quiet again. She was still going around the place like a mad woman. Gave it to the next guy, and instantly, he was from the UK, instantly, he was jumping around the place in his bed, like going from side to side, and he's like, fucking hell, and that was his whole process. He was jumping from and I was just like going, oh my God, what is this? And I was like, I wish that guy who was telling us how amazing it was when his gang was here, because they had left, to see this. I was like, this is absolute mayhem. I was like, if anybody looked in the window now, they'd be like, what the hell is going on? So he was going around, fucking hell. And they'd given it to another guy as well in the end, he started bursting out laughing, and he was uncontrollably laughing for the whole time. And then there was someone else, like, again, kind of screaming demonically and rolling around the place. And it was just like, oh my fucking God.
And how long does that process last? Because you said it was fast.
Yeah, I'd say it was like 20 minutes all in kind of thing.
And then when they came out of it, did you remember
when they came out of it?
Did they all think it was positive?
Yeah. And I feel that's the way it happens, even with lots of medicines. Like, even if you've a really rough ayahuasca journey afterwards, it's kind of like, wow, whatever. But I mean, Bufo is a totally other level. So then at lunch, and they were all a bit like kind of quiet and subdued and just like, wow. And we were all talking to them because they were like, what the hell? What did you experience? Like, what was going on? They're like, oh my God, that's the most incredible thing I've ever done in my life. They're like, I don't even have the words to describe it. It was so amazing. We were like, what? It looked like absolute torture from where we were. But every single one of them was just like, oh my God. Oh my God. And yeah.
So then what encouraged you to do it later on?
Beckon started calling me, and because I was like, no, absolutely no way. I was like, that's just too far for me. I was like, no way, definitely not doing that. And it was probably a year or two later, eventually when it started calling me, and I was just like, oh my God, and again, every time I have to say, I was like, terrified, and not terrified like so much that I wouldn't do it, but I think it's normal to be apprehensive. And every other time I was like, well, I know I've always come out. I know I've got so many benefits. I know it's actually going to be all fine. I know I have changed in so many ways from all these things. I know I can trust it. But still, it's like, what am I doing? And why do I want to do this kind of thing? But it called me, but that one especially, I was just like, because whatever about trying to hold on and finding it difficult and letting go with ayahuasca, knowing that there is no chance kind of thing with Bufo, and seeing all the things that I'd witnessed as well. Even though everyone had positive experiences, I was just like, I don't know, like, what am I going to do then in my human form when my body's there while I'm gone off?
I think it's kind of the whole point. You know, you really do raise to this higher sense of consciousness, and you see the vastness of the universe and how we and our experiences are very small in comparison. And it makes me think a little bit. I have a good friend, Arti Argawal, that is trained level 3 as a QHHT practitioner. And for those that don't know QHHT, it is a form of hypnosis known as quantum healing hypnotherapy technique. And so her and I bartered and we did each other's programs. So she went through my RTT program and I went on a journey with her through QHHT. And QHHT is really designed to be a past life regression. And what I always say is, I say to her, Arti, when I work with people, it's like I'm tapping into the subconscious of this current experience of life in the current present moment on this current present plane. And what you do is you tap into the subconscious of the soul, which is not time bound.
Yeah, no.
And it is not plane bound, and it is multidimensional. And I went through that experience and I saw myself in many different lives and many different time periods. And I watched myself float almost metaphysically. And it was so interesting because when I ended up watching Spider-Verse with my son, and I ended up watching one of the Ant-Man movies where they go into this like metaphysical space of universe, I was like, in my head, I was like, I've been there. Like, it was how I experienced it. It was really interesting. And it made me think, what kind of research did they do to create that movie to get it so exacting? Because it reminded me very much of this vastness of just floating in space between. It's almost like I was with my soul in between lives at one point. It's all very relatively quick, but not.
Yeah.
But what it allows you to do when you integrate these experiences into your life is it gives you a perspective of the vastness of all that is encompassing around you, and that the experiences you've had here and now that feel so overwhelming, that have us so stuck in this lifetime until you go through these facilitated experiences, they rule everything. But when you can get that high above it, and you're looking at things almost from this observer or this drone level, from this 100,000 foot view, you can see it's one of many experiences and it's not as impactful as we're making it.
Absolutely.
You know, it's like I had a client who did a number of ayahuasca retreats. She's constantly dabbling with MDMA and ketamine and all these different things. And she also sees me and she's just always on this journey. And she said to me what my experience with her allowed her to see. And I think people get this too when they go on these facilitated experiences like you have, is the experience she may have had that was challenging as a child. And she had quite a bit of challenging experiences. The interpretation got so much bigger than the experience and it almost snowballed, meaning it started as this moment or series of moments. And then the more attention she gave it and the more interpretation she gave it and the more she allowed it to keep rolling in her system, the bigger the snowball got. It was like coming down a hill until by the time it got to her, it was a boulder, but it started the size of a pebble. And with these experiences, she's been able to see the experience through a more appropriate sized lens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And again, like I said before, I think that's the intention of doing any kind of modality, or if someone connects with any kind of therapist, alternative healer, whatever it is to gain some different perspective. It is to free ourselves of these mental constructs and stories that actually keep us so hidden and buried and like heavy in ourselves.
Yes.
Ran totally disconnected from the bigger picture. Whereas actually, when we do open up again and connect to the bigger picture, it gives a totally different perspective. And I remember one night during a journey, I think it was the second time. And I remember I was lying down and I was feeling quite nauseous. And everything is heightened, you know, when you're in this state as well, like the music, sounds from other people, your own inner thoughts. And I was feeling quite nauseous, but I will say my head was here and my bucket was at my feet. So I was just like, oh my God, I don't want to get, you know, I was like, am I really going to get sick though? Like, I don't want to get up and lean over my book. And if I don't get sick, like I'm going to look like an asshole in front of everyone. Like, what are they going to think? And I was doing this for, I don't know how long. And then I just caught myself and I was like, this is the bullshit I need to fucking get rid of. And
I was just thinking, like, you're worrying about what other people think in the middle of the ceremony. That's the whole purpose.
That was showing me to me, because that's the kind of bullcrap that was going on anyway that I wasn't even aware of. So the minute that I had that realization, this is the bloody shit I need to get rid of, I like jolted up. I like puked into my bucket and I got rid of it. And they always say as well, if you do purge, to give thanks, to give gratitude for it, because it's an old part, it's an old trauma, it's an old, you know, ancestral thing, it's blocked emotions, energies, whatever it is. And I swear to God, in that first bucket, I was pretty much nearly bawling into it. To me, actually, as well, it looked like a lion. And it's not like normal vomit, because people are like, oh, you got sick and how did you, it's different. And it was the most beautiful thing in the whole entire world. I was like, oh my God, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. But I literally felt like nearly something dislodged as well from like here in the middle of my chest. And I was like, this is the fucking crap that I needed to let go of. Like all these stories. And then I looked around and I was like, everyone's in their own process. Nobody gives a crap. And here I was battling. And then I was like, oh my God. And there was another night I remember like that. I was twisting and I nearly felt like I was doing aerobics, or not aerobics, like yoga. And I felt like I was twisting and all night. And I hadn't got sick throughout the whole journey. And just the whole night I was like moving and twisting. And again, it's like bringing new energy and life force and movement and connection into my body, because I was totally cut off. So this was my whole night. And I was trying to sleep because, again, you're tired and it's just like, oh God, I just want to sleep, but you can't. And it's twisting and blah, blah, blah. And it was going literally all night. And then eventually I went to get sick. And oh my God, it was the most incredible thing. But literally, as I was going to get sick, I felt like from the base of my spine, from my root chakra, I felt this like thing just pop up. And when it was coming out my throat, it felt like massive. It felt kind of furry and I don't know what. And it's like my throat expanded, because I was just like, oh, I'm just going to get sick. Like, And next thing was like, oh my God, this is massive. And even then afterwards, I remember it felt like all rancid oils, or it smelled like, I don't know, old Chinese or that kind of smell. And it was just, again, it was just like that one. I really felt like it went into every aspect, every cell of my body, every organ, and really cleansed and purged. And that was it. And then my whole journey was over and I had the best sleep. I was like, I am done. So, you know, every time is so different. I think it really does. Like, seriously, the stories could go on and on and on. And the more I tap into those times again, the more I remember more. Because again, when you're in it, and this is the other side of it, because when you're in it, like you just touched on, everything makes sense. You see the bigger picture. You're just like, oh my God, yes. And it's not personal and you're beyond the human. And it's all perfect and it's okay, and the compassion and the love, and it's amazing. And it's like, yeah, it's fine. And then you come back into your body and you wake up and you're kind of like, what was that? Like you forget again. And that's the work piece as well, to work with what comes up, to remember and stay connected to this bigger aspect and integrate it. Because, now it's the truth of, we're not a body having a spiritual experience, or my spirit does not live in my body. My body lives in my spirit. And it's flipping that script, and it's allowing that full connection and guidance and perspective and intention and everything to support us through all the humanness. And again, it takes work. It doesn't always happen straight away. But again, like you touched on as well, like just looking back over everything, I can just see the perfection of it all, and how every little touch point or every little random thing, it just all makes sense. And I mean that from the very first childhood trauma throughout. It's just like, I see how it all happened and why it happened and why I turned this way and this, and it's just like, oh my God. But again, it takes work to stay in that connection. And it takes work to know that that's a truth. Because I know even at the beginning, there was a time where I was like, I felt a bit of uncertainty of, was that really something so supportive? And is there a truth here? Or was that just a good experience? And also, there was I felt a little bit of shame around, oh, I've done this. Did I take an easy way out?
Interesting.
Whereas there's nothing easy about any of them, but especially that. But again, that's why
I think what you're saying is this, because I'm hearing it. To be human is to suffer. Okay. Yeah. So we are souls having a human experience, and to be human is to suffer. And so when I hear you say, am I taking the easy way out? It's like I'm disconnecting from the human experience for a moment. And now that I've seen what I've seen, things just make sense. And so therefore I need to suffer less. Right?
Yeah, totally. And
it's crazy.
Not only that as well, it really helped me personally in my journey, because again, everyone will get something different. Because again, like I touched on in the last episode, I was that shut down person. I was afraid to feel. I lived in my head. I thought if I can overthink, overanalyze, control everything, I was safe. And it really cracked me open as well to feeling and to seeing what a gift it is to feel, and like all emotions, because that's part of the humanity. I get to feel it all, and it's so beautiful, but I don't have to live as that feeling. I don't have to stay in that story. I get to feel it. I get to learn from it. I get to grow, and I get to evolve, and I get to choose again, and I get to feel something better.
It's a perfect ending spot. Amazing, amazing, amazing. So here's the thing. If people have been inspired or curious, want to know more, I'd love to be able to put them in touch with you, even just to gain more perspective. So what's the best way for people to reach out to you?
Yeah. So, and again, I've even worked in my coaching with some people who have done, retreats and plant medicines as well, who have been left in a space that I was left in. So helping in that process as well. But absolutely, I'm happy to answer questions or guide in any way if I can, and lead in the right direction. So just even on my website, KarenMaloney.com, or just email me, Karen@KarenMaloney.com, or contact via my website. And just feel free to reach out, because I know how it is sometimes. And it's not a nice place to be left if you are left in a place that's really, you're feeling really open, exposed, uncertain, isolated. It's actually very difficult as well to talk about. I think now people are a bit more open and they've heard a bit more about it. But when I first started or did my journeys, 4 or 5 years ago, if you talk about these things as well to some people who aren't open, you just sound like an absolute nut job. So even to be able to talk openly about your experiences and share is really important as well, because it's like, no, you're not a nut job. I totally believe that's something that happened or that you experienced, because it is very unique in that way as well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. So guys, all of the show notes will have Karen's information, but again, it's Karen at KarenMaloney.com is her email, and her website is Karen Maloney. This has been a great opportunity to learn more, even from my perspective, because I have been hearing about it so much. I have a handful of clients that have done it. I have some that are exploring it as we speak. And so thank you so much. And hope to have you back again soon. Guys, if this episode spoke to you, subscribe, tune in so you can be notified of future episodes. And I hope you guys have an awesome, blessed day.
Thank you so much, Stacey.